is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and today I want to talk about how Bitcoin is unstoppable. It's good to be back. I took a couple days off, went up in the Rocky Mountains, and was able to catch this amazing sunrise picture. While I was gone, obviously a lot of FUD happening. I got so many panicked emails and messages and comments, especially because of Ray Dalio's comments about Bitcoin. This is, I think, nothing to worry about. This may happen 10 years from now, but all you need to know, the best refutation of this is just that Goldman Sachs is restarting their crypto and Bitcoin desk. These are the people who are really in charge. And when you have Wall Street so on board Bitcoin, you don't have to worry anything about Bitcoin being banned. I suspect, I don't want to be too cynical, but perhaps Bridgewater or Dalio himself is getting a little salty that he's missed out on the Bitcoin run. Maybe the firm needs to buy some Bitcoin. You never know. I don't want to ascribe bad motives, but this just seems kind of out of nowhere in the comparison to the U.S. confiscating gold in 1933. We're in a very, very different world here. It's much more global. Bitcoin is obviously much more mobile. We have the internet. We have Twitter monitoring everything. And so pulling something like this off is much more difficult and much more unlikely. At least I think we're many years out from it. So especially when Wall Street, as I said, is so on board. We had a pullback in Bitcoin back to the 50-day moving average while I was gone and bounced strongly off the 50-day moving average. So the chart is still very much intact. If Bitcoin were to spike down to 30,000 or 40,000, it wouldn't concern me in the least. This is a very volatile asset. And I think it just goes to show you have to really understand what you own. You shouldn't buy any Bitcoin unless you've done a lot of research, you've watched a lot of my videos, you've read a bunch of books about it, and you've really put the time in to think about it. Because if you're going to be panicked by articles like this, you're just not going to survive this Bitcoin journey, because there are much worse things probably coming. This is very mild by comparison. I was very comfortable holding Bitcoin while I didn't have an internet connection. Not something I worried about at all. Just Bitcoin, at least for me, is the sleep tight at night asset. And the thing you can tell yourself, you do really think that all these billionaires are buying Bitcoin and then they're just going to sit by idly and let the U.S. government ban it. We have Fidelity getting on board with planning to launch a Bitcoin ETF. It looks almost certain that we're going to have an ETF, whether it's from VanEck or Fidelity or one of these other companies, that will have one by the end of the year. And what this means is just huge coming retail flows into Bitcoin, something similar that happened with the gold ETF back in the early 2000s. Obviously, I alluded to Tesla now accepting Bitcoin for their cars. I alluded to this at the end of my last video. I didn't really get to talk about it much, but the really significant thing in this tweet is that Bitcoin paid to Tesla, according to Musk in this tweet, will be retained as Bitcoin, not converted to fiat currency. And what this means is that here's another company like MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor that's becoming a Bitcoin black hole. Once this Bitcoin goes into Tesla, it's staying there on the balance sheet. And this contributes even more to the scarcity and the huge supply shortages that Bitcoin is experiencing. I like this tweet from Charles Edwards. If just 3% of Tesla sales are in Bitcoin, that's $1 billion worth of Bitcoin buying per year locked into the balance sheet. So if everything stayed steady state, that would be $1 billion a year added to Bitcoin. So it's roughly in $1 trillion market cap, that's $1 billion. But Tesla sales are obviously growing very quickly. The number of sales that will involve Bitcoin should increase over time as it gains more and more adoption. And so when you combine sales growing at 30% and Bitcoin adoption growing, you're looking at a 50% growth rate on $1 billion per year being sucked into Tesla. So this is a giant Bitcoin black hole. And it also gives the lie. I still get these comments all the time in my YouTube videos. You can't buy anything with Bitcoin. Obviously, you can buy many, many things with Bitcoin, but this is probably the most prominent example now that you can actually buy a Tesla. Now, I think that's a very bad trade, to trade your precious Bitcoin for a depreciating asset, even if it's a Tesla, which is a pretty cool car. But the other thing, this was quite a blow to the Bitcoin Cash and the Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision, BSV folks. If you go and look in the FAQ for Tesla Bitcoin purchases, what cryptocurrency does Tesla accept? Tesla only accepts Bitcoin, not Bitcoin fork products like BCH, Bcash, or BSV. I often get this in my comments that Bitcoin's a store of value, but that Bitcoin Cash is going to be the new medium of exchange, or XRP, or Ethereum, Ether. But you'll notice that none of these ended up being the medium of exchange for Musk and Tesla. He picked Bitcoin. And this is obviously, this is what I've been telling you, that BCH, Ethereum, these other cryptocurrencies, they're very, very different. And it's usually the thing that becomes a store of value that goes on to become a medium of exchange. If you're finding this video helpful, I'd encourage you to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and maybe share the video as well with a couple friends. In more international news, it turns out that Temasek, which is a huge sovereign wealth fund, I believe out of Singapore, has been buying Bitcoin since 2018, at least according to Raoul Pal. So this is, if the U.S. goes and bans Bitcoin, obviously it just gives an advantage to all the other countries like Singapore, where Bitcoin is still legal. Here's another article about a retirement fund, a growth retirement fund in New Zealand that's now accepting Bitcoin. And we're seeing this more and more. This is how Bitcoin adoption spreads. And for those people who can't figure out how to buy Bitcoin on their own, or they're not comfortable custodying it, this is how Bitcoin is going to get into their portfolios. A lot of people who say, well, I will never buy Bitcoin, they're actually going to end up owning Bitcoin in their retirement accounts. In fact, they already do, because they probably own an S&P index fund, which has Tesla in it, and Tesla owns Bitcoin. I believe MicroStrategy as well. Oh, actually, it's probably too small. It's probably in some of the smaller cap funds, but chances are you actually own some Bitcoin, even if you absolutely hate it, if you own just a simple stock index fund. In even bigger news, and this again gives the lie to what Ray Dalio is talking about, NYDIG just confirmed that sovereign wealth funds, these are giant funds run by countries where they invest their own wealth, maybe like the Norway fund, where they take their oil revenues, or Saudi Arabia, take their oil profits and invest them for the future of the country. They're called sovereign wealth funds. They've been approaching NYDIG about buying Bitcoin. This is really the end game when you have central banks, when you have governments, when you have sovereign wealth funds buying Bitcoin. And if you really think that the U.S. government's going to outlaw Bitcoin while all these countries are buying Bitcoin, it just doesn't make any sense. The game theory actually suggests that you should buy Bitcoin as soon as possible, especially if you're a country. The first country to buy it then benefits from all the other buyers coming in. So this is really huge news. And people used to say you'd never see an S&P 500 company own Bitcoin. We've seen that, and now we're going to see a Bitcoin ETF, and we're eventually going to see some of these sovereign wealth funds probably already own some Bitcoin, but it's really going to accelerate. People worried about, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, FATF or FATF regulations. And this is, for those of you who don't know, FATF, Financial Action Task Force, global money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog. So this is intergovernmental institution. They obviously are very interested in keeping an eye on Bitcoin, but the people in the Bitcoin space are very smart. For example, Binance, which is one of the largest crypto exchanges, Bitcoin exchanges in the world, just hired 2 former FATF executives. This is why Bitcoin, once it is here, and once Goldman Sachs is selling it and allowing their customers to buy it, when Fidelity is allowing their customers to buy it, and when you have all these regulators crossing the wall and moving on the corporate side and advising that this is the sort of thing that makes it very, very, very unlikely that Bitcoin will be banned anytime anytime soon. Meanwhile, the price action of Bitcoin, we're obviously in a bit of a sideways motion here, but everything's intact. And I think the second half of 2021 is going to be absolutely spectacular. As I've said, I see Bitcoin hitting $200,000 per Bitcoin by the end of 2021. I think this is probably a fairly conservative target. It's a pretty easy prediction to make. Plan B here points out that monthly RSI in the last couple bull markets, 2013, 2017, we had at least 3 months above 95 on the RSI. This is sort of a relative strength index. Here in 2013, we can see the 3 monthly dots above 95. Likewise, in 2017, we haven't even gotten to 95 in this 2021 bull run. And so we're still very early in this bull market. I think every dip should be bought. I bought some Bitcoin before I went out of town. Plan B, another tweet. We're only 4 months into the bull market, nowhere near the end of it. This is his stock to flow cross asset model, and he has a price target of $288,000 this year or next year as well. And so playing out very well. We're obviously looking at out of sample data here now on the stock to flow cross asset model. And what we should expect to see is an overshoot. We can see that we got a big overshoot right here in 2013, a big overshoot in 2017. And so we're talking an overshoot this year or early next year would look something like, anything above $288,000. So it really looks something like $300,000, $400,000 per Bitcoin. And I think this is very doable, especially given the huge institutional demand that we have this cycle, which really wasn't present in 2017 and 2013. That was really more of a retail bull market. Meanwhile, we have continued attacks on Bitcoin and Bitcoiners. I think this is really just the beginning of it. I don't know why these things seem to always come from a professor. This is Dave Karpf, associate professor at George Washington University at the School of Media and Public Affairs. Looks like a very snarky guy based on his picture, but his idea is actually to kill all the Bitcoiners. It's amazing that a professor could put this out. Obviously, he tries to hide it by saying thought experiment, but this is really a genocidal tweet, if you could call it that, against Bitcoiners. We should kill all the Bitcoiners because then the entire speculative economy would collapse, since the bulk of all Bitcoin would be irretrievable. Clubhouse would be much less raucous. Female tech journalists would be harassed less, blah, blah, blah. Really just an unbelievable tweet. This guy must not understand what central banks are, what they do, and to blame sexual harassment on Bitcoin. I just don't know what sort of world these people live in. Unfortunately, his university, someone should tell him that they denounce any form of hate, and someone should really look into this, because you can't have people. You could just substitute, for Bitcoin enthusiasts, substitute whatever other ethnic group, interest group, special interest group you want, and it looks very nasty as well. So I imagine his employers should take a look at this and maybe do something about that. Meanwhile, continue to be very hopeful with Bitcoin. I think this is really probably the easiest investment I've ever seen in my life in terms of upside potential. Obviously it's volatile. It's only volatile though. It's a little bit like Schrodinger's cat. It's only volatile if you look at it, and if you don't look at it, there's no volatility. So I have to make these videos, and so obviously I need to check the price. But when I was up in the mountains this last week, I was really thinking, wow, I could just stay up here, and it'd be really interesting to just come back in 5 or 10 years and see where the price of Bitcoin is. I think that's really the mentality you should adopt as a hodler. If you're constantly checking the price, constantly checking the news, chances are you are going to get wrecked on one of these dips. These dips can be very scary. If you look at them in the context of the chart, they look like nothing. For example, this late mid-November crash in 2020, November of 2020, just a blip on the chart. Likewise, even March of 2020, which was extremely difficult to live through if you were watching your screen, is nothing. It's just a complete blip. And that was when Bitcoin hit about $4,000 or $5,000. We're now getting pullbacks in excess of what the price of Bitcoin was. So if Bitcoin was $5,000 here, we've had a pullback of more than $10,000. And so this is how Bitcoin compounds. This is the path that it takes. It's volatile. There's always a lot of FUD surrounding it. But if you understand why you own it, you will do very well. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.